Good evening, everybody. This is All Things Cheryl. And basically, I am here to do another review and another recap on Cherish today. As you know, last week I began uh, doing the fifth episode of Cherish today. I stated that I was going to upload one, two, three, four for the review, but I decided no, let me just go ahead and do episode 5. And so we did episode 5 last week, and I want to thank all of you all who basically came in and checked out exactly my review and my recap. Now we're going to go with episode 6. And of course, as you know, as you know, Oprah and Ava DuVernay decided that they wanted to do an anthology. And the anthology is about a event that takes place in one specific day. And of course, you all know that Evan and Gently has basically gotten married, but they had a non-traditional wedding. The fact that there were just the two of them. And so we're going to go with the timeline of 8:10. In episode 6, we see that Evans is basically in his closet looking for a particular shirt. It seems that Evan has a big day, and that big day is that he is going to be meeting with his partner and the board of directors to talk about him and his partner and the app that they have basically gotten off of the ground. Now, the timeline is 2 years. So within that 2 years, it seems that Evan and Jetley are doing pretty good. Everything is moving along as it should be. And it seems that Jetley has basically, I'm going to say that she has settled in her role as being a wife, which is something that she too didn't really want to do, but being that she settled and now Jetley is now a housewife, making sure that she meets all of the needs that will make Evan happy and will make him successful in his business. And now we see that we're still in the timeline of 8:10. And within that timeline, we flash back to episode 5, where the both of them are in front of the pastor and their back is to one another. And the pastor is basically telling, especially Gently, what her role as a woman would basically be. And he also stated that her role basically is for her to basically to cater to his needs. Now we know that Gently was not too much of catering. I mean, she's still in love with her husband, but she has basically given up somewhat a part of herself and to make sure that Evan is basically successful. And we see that within that 2 years lap, We know that Gently has basically moved in with Evan, and that they have a housekeeper, which I had no idea, but and I can see why and how they communicated their vows in Spanish. It seems like they have, I don't like to use the word Spanish, but a Latino person who's basically somewhat. I'm not going to say they're made, but basically make sure that everything is, neat and tidy. And so Gently tells Evan that she believes that the housekeeper doesn't like her. And so Evan says, well, if you basically stop doing her job, she would be fine. And we have a housekeeper. It's not me. He says it's we. And so we go on and we get to the part where Evan's partners basically called him to basically let him know that they have a meeting and that he must be on time. Now, Evan is not so excited about this meeting of the board. It seems that they're doing pretty good within that 2 years, but Evan's partner is not on board with this woman who basically will be able to take the app and the company to the next level. Now we basically see the flashback, and we're still in the timeline of uh 8:10, but we're moving into now 9:55, which we basically see Evan and the partner basically at the office having a discussion with the board, and the board wants Evan and his partner to consider. His partner is not really enthused about it because he feels that this acquisition person who's basically want to have a part of their company will just come in and ravage and just basically come in and somewhat destroyed all of the information that they have basically put together so much. So Evan's partner is telling him that um, it's not going to be the same. So around 9:45, 9:55, we see that um, Gently, basically Gently is coming together, and Gently is basically also getting ready to meet Miss Luna. Now we know that Gently has basically moved out of Mrs. Luna house and moved in with Evan. And I basically feel that I don't think that well, anyway, I feel that they should have basically found another house where Gently could basically be a part of the deciding which house to move in. I think that they should have had moved in the house where Evan had already, even though he settled. I think it's somewhat when you're doing a new beginning, I believe that who's ever most off, I think that it should have been finding a house together or whatever. So it won't be so much of Gently moving in, but the both of them would be able to move in the same house, but put the energy of both of their characteristics within the house. That's exactly how I feel about it. But anyway, we see that around 9:55, somewhere around 10:05, Gently is basically over at Mrs. Luna's house, and we get to see the young fellow or the new person who has taken Gently's place as being Mrs. Luna's care provider. Now, of course, this is a tall, skinny, young person, and he's basically following Miss Luna all around, and Miss Luna is really, really not having it. She's asking him not to follow her, not to somewhat cater to her. He also, I can understand why he's doing it, because Miss Luna is very small, very fragile, and very small. So I'm assuming that he doesn't want anything to happen to her. But we go on and we see that Gently has told Miss Luna that she's looking very good, and how is everything working with her new care provider. And of course, Miss Luna says, well, he likes to cheat at chess, and that he is not basically her. So Miss Luna is telling Gently that she has to stop comparing how her and Miss Luna used to get along, and she has to stop, because she basically does meet does Mrs. Her. And so around, we're still at time frame, and around 10 o'clock in the morning, moving into around 10:30, even though the time frame is saying something different. It's around 10:30, and we see that Gently and Miss Luna, and there's a woman, another older woman, and her name is Mrs. Barbara. And apparently, Mrs. Barbara is Miss Luna's agent. Uh, it seems that the one another reason why Gently went to see Miss Luna is because it seems that she has somewhat gotten a section in PBS where Miss Luna will get a chance to basically talk about being in the industry in the early, I guess, 30s and 40s at the time, where it was not very well known. Not too many black people basically was in the film industry, and at PBS, she's gotten PBS to basically take a look at Miss Luna. So while we're there, we also find out that even though Miss Barbara is there, but she's also there to basically deliver some bad news to Miss Luna, and that is that PBS is have decided to go with someone else instead of basically seeing and hearing the history and of Miss Luna and other uh, people of color in the film industry. And so while we hear that, we see that Gentry is basically standing in the background and listening to the story that Barbara and Miss Luna was basically talking about, the good old days, and the fact that time has changed and it's not the same anymore. And so we hear and we see that Evans has basically called to see how Gently is basically doing, and we're still in this time frame, and the time frame is around 10:30, 11 o'clock. We're moving into 11, so the time frame will be around 11:55. Evan has basically called and did a FaceTime with Gently. Of course, we're in the 21st century, so there's FaceTime basically going on. And he noticed that Gently is basically crying. And so we know that previous early in the morning, um, there was a little bit of miscommunication. In other words, Gently and Evans uh, basically had some. I mean, I kind of get my timing. Anyway, so we see that Gently is crying. So Evan tells, "Why are you crying?" So Gently says, "Well, they turned down Miss Luna, and there has to be another way that we can get and have Miss Luna's basically story told." And so this is when Evans basically asks and let Gently know that if she could help him with another hosting up another party. So I'm assuming that there have been Gently and Evan has been doing a lot of hosting of the parties and stuff like that to basically get their app going. So they're doing really good. So you could tell that Gently is kind of sort of I'm not gonna say she's happy, and I'm not gonna say she's unhappy, but it seems like when you have a husband who's basically bringing home the bucks, the bag, that the wife basically takes up the responsibility of entertaining guests. And so Evan let Gently know that he is going to be hosting and there's another party and he wants her to basically help him to put this party together. And so Gently is like, well, okay. And so we go on into another timeline. Another timeline is like we're moving into around 12:30, 12 o'clock. And this is when we see that Gently is basically preparing and putting things together for Evans basically hosting the party. And we see that Gently is talking to Miss Barbara, who is Miss Luna's agent, and then we find that Miss Luna is also babysitting her son's kids and everything. And so we see the two of them trying to put their brains together and figure out a way that they can get Miss Luna's story basically told about her being in Hollywood at the time. And so this is when Gently says, well, maybe I can probably put together a petition, and I know about maybe 300 people who would basically sign the petition. So, and then this is when we find out a little bit more about Miss Barbara. Apparently, back in the day, Miss Barbara used to be the agent for the well-known Hollywood stars, agents for most of the black, for the black people who are basically in Hollywood. And so basically she goes on and she, elaborates a little bit the fact that Hollywood basically have not been very nice and very kind when it came to the black um, actresses and actors within that season. And she was saying that Hollywood basically could be very, very nasty. In my opinion, it's still like that. The discrimination within the Hollywood, within the film industry, is basically still like that. And so we go on. And so this is when Gently says, well, they were still upset due to the fact that PBS has turned Miss Luna down. And so this is when Gently said, well, we're basically going to have to go bypass this, the TV, and basically go somewhere else. And maybe we can probably maybe do a YouTube or something. And so this is when the idea of a podcast came to Gentry. And Gentry said, yeah, we can basically do a podcast. And she told Miss Barbara, we can basically do a podcast. And Miss Barbara says, well, I know about the podcast and everything. So at the time, Gentry was basically preparing the meal, but she basically cut herself. So she had to basically get off of the phone because she was not concentrating. She messed around and cut herself. So then we move into the time frame of three. Let me see, I wrote this down. Yeah, we're moving to the time frame of 331. 331, of course, Gentry has been with Miss Luna and Miss Barbara to talk about exactly what's going on with the two of them and the fact that she has came up with an idea of doing a podcast. So around 331, time frame of 331, Evans has basically came home early to prepare for this party, and Gentry was basically very enthused at the fact that she has basically come up with an idea to do a podcast to get Miss Luna story, the history of her being in Hollywood. And you know that Gentry has always been very inundated with all of the stories and things that Miss Luna has basically told her how it was in Black Hollywood at the time that Miss Luna came through. So you know, at the time, and I'm thinking the time frame would be, Amos and Andy, all of those stories like Gone with the Wind, where there wasn't too many black people in Hollywood, and there were certain parts that they basically told. So it was very, excited at the fact that she has come up with an idea. Now, podcast right now is a wave of the future. Everybody specifically is doing a podcast, right? I even attempt doing a podcast. I think it's somewhere I have one, but I really haven't gone through it again because there are some things I need to get. But anyway, so we go on with the fact that even though Gently is very excited, but Evan is not there. It's not on board. And Gently is getting very disturbed at the fact that Evan is not really thinking about what's going on with her. And then we see that Evan has gotten upset. And this is when Evan went in on Gently and telling Gently, look, I understand, what's going on, but I have this party that this woman is basically coming in and offering $17 million, and $17 million is basically you don't have a bill, you don't have to pay for a house note, you don't have to do any of that. Basically, it's a way to provide you with whatever you want to do, be free, whatever you want to do. And then this is when Gently and Evan realized that he had basically went in on gently, 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 without even realizing that he was went on. And then he realized what he did, and then gently said, "Don't worry about it. You basically said, what you meant. I understand that you working and that you have provided a very good lifestyle basically for me, and I understand that, and I do not take that for granted." And so Evan realized what he had basically said, and he was basically trying to basically apologize. But Jelly said, "No, don't worry about it. Let's just try to get this done and everything." So, and she tells him to go ahead, go take a shower or anything, and let's get this and let's make this happen. And so, of course, Evans basically goes and he gets into the shower. So she basically comes in there, basically with him, and of course, they make up and everything because both of them still love each other. I mean, it's 2 years, so 2 years is they're still moving kind of strong. But you can tell that Gently has basically kind of sort of lost her way. Where is that the preacher? She's basically focusing on Evan and not really focus on herself. This is one reason why she said no. She wanted to get some time as far as when Evan first proposed to her. And she said, "Well, I'm not quite ready." But now we are seeing. Now we get a chance to meet this woman who is going to be doing acquisition, who is going to be getting into be a part of the app, be a part of the business, which Evan's partner is not really, on board because he feels that by her coming in, it's going to change the app all by itself. So we get a chance to meet this woman. We see that she is married. We also see that her husband does a lot of traveling. So basically, they started to conduct business, and then this is where we see that um, she noticed that the picture that Evan basically bought when Gentry and him first got together was on the wall, and Evan says that, well, Gently knows a lot about the artists and things like that. So they move into the kitchen, and this is when we find out that Gently has prepared basically a meal. Now we know that Gently is very, very well traveled, right? And so we find out that Gently has pulled no punches to make sure that Evan would impress this woman who's actually interested in the app and his business partner, her business. And so we find out that Gently basically knows about food and wine. That's not an issue, because this is when Gently goes in and tells the ladies and the husband basically about the wine, about the cheese, and the fact that she did some backpacking when she was in one particular country. And so the woman was very, very much impressed with the fact that Gently was basically sort of well traveled. And so Evan and the woman basically started to conduct business. And then this is where we see that there is somewhat some similarity when it comes to the lady's husband and Gentry. It's the fact that he is a well traveled man. He does a lot of traveling. Within 6 months, I guess he basically go on and basically does his own thing. And so this is when we find out that he says to Jimmy, he says, well, I see that Evan has basically made a very well perfect life for you. And this is when Jenny tells the guy that the husband, that she's traveled a lot, but she really hasn't really traveled that much due to the fact over, I guess, the 2 years that Evan and her basically been together, she has neglected that part of her, and she is yearning to basically travel some more. And so we go on and we see the conversation that the woman's husband have with Gently. And this is when we find out that this woman's husband has basically tapped into Gently, and he gave her his experience as being when he first got married. Basically, he felt very trapped within within the marriage, because his wife was one of those persons who goes in, who buy other people's business acquisition, and he was losing himself until eventually he found himself again. And how he found himself again is that he himself was basically well traveled, basically like Gentry. And so this is when the gentleman told Gently that you could basically start traveling again. It's because Gently says that she hasn't done any traveling, and she's yearning to feel other suns in other places. And he says, well, basically, I can't see why you can't do it, and basically while you're doing it, you can also make money doing it. And he also told Gently is that once she becomes within, sure about herself in the wedding, in the marriage, that wherever she goes and she comes, if she decides to travel again, that once she understands and she's comfortable within the marriage and she's not feeling that she's in a box, that she would be all right. So this is when we see that basically Gently has gotten a call, and she's gotten a call from Barbara. And basically, Barbara is at a event that her son has basically invited her to, and come to find out that this event was somewhere where she has came into contact with her son, and her son is doing an event for people who is basically in the podcast business. Excuse me. That's basically in the podcast business. And so she was telling Gently, she said, well, look, you basically need to come on, you need to come here. You need to basically come and fill this room out, come and have a cocktail or something like this. She says, and then this is Gently says, well, why don't you basically, get a business card, tell some people about, the idea and everything. And so this is when Barbara says, look, I don't really know anything about this podcast business. And basically, this is really, really up to you to basically decide, come on over here and introduce yourself and basically come and get some of this money that's flowing through here. Maybe I can introduce you to someone, get you hooked up, and get you and Miss Luna some money. And so this is when Gently says, well, I don't know, basically I'm doing a party for my husband and everything. I just don't know. And so this is when we see um, Evan and the woman basically talking to Evan about his business, about the fact that she tells him that his business is very good, but he basically has his hands on the pulse, and the hands on the pulse is the fact that he's gathering data, he's gathering information, and that she loves his business. But she also told him that while you're doing all of this, I understand that the fact that you want to, make, you want to go to the next level, but there's something about it. You want to be able to, be a part of the community. And then this is where she talks about Bill Gates and a couple of other rich, famous people who are basically into the tech field. And then this is when Evan basically flashes back to when he was at his mother and father anniversary, and the auntie asks about why isn't that you're on this list of the 10 most famous tech people on this list. And we see that Evan says, well, I'm getting to it, Auntie, I'm getting to it. So there's a lot of flashback back and forth to let us see exactly the development of Evan and Gently. It's moving along. Now we see that this woman tells Evan this fact that she says that the fact of the matter is, she says that Bill Gates and all of these people, they are basically rich, but they're also wealthy. She says that they have generational, what was it, generational wealth. In other words, legacy. In other words, they're building a legacy. In other words, he doesn't really have to worry about uh, where the next bill are making it. They were building generational wealth. Now, the generational wealth is that once Evan gets this app up and it's going, because she's like, $17 million. That's a lot of money, and I'm pretty sure it will be adding even more. But she says, why be rich where you can have generational wealth. And so this is when gently, while they're talking about generational wealth, and this is when we see gently basically calling Miss Barbara back and asking Miss Barbara basically uh, that she was basically coming. And so Miss Barbara says, "Good, I will text you the information." She said, "I will text you this information." And she says, "Now I understand, this thing about." Being there, standing by your man and everything. I understand all of this. But this is what Jeffrey said, "Well, I don't know." And then this is when Barbara says that he will basically understand that he is a businessman. So he will understand. And so this is when Gently says, "Well, I don't know, but we will see." And this is when we know Gently uh, the expression on her face. She basically looked outside and she see that Evan and the lady has basically perhaps come to some agreements when it comes to she's being a part of this app that Evan is getting ready to do. So basically, I pretty much lost that timeline. So, but it was somewhere between I would say 9:30, 10 o'clock, and we know that Jet is basically getting ready to see exactly what her future is going to be, especially when dealing with this podcast. But one thing that I like about the meeting of the two minds, especially Gently and this woman's husband, he told Gently, once you become very, very secure within your marriage and you and your future and you making money also, the marriage will basically survive. So I basically was kind of sort of on the mark when I said that these two, I believe they're going to separate a little bit. Not separate as far as getting moving out, but Gently is getting ready to move or to get her passion back. And that passion was that she loved traveling. And then they flash back again when we see that Gently and Evans basically was talking about being happy and getting what it is that you want to be happy. And we also flash back another time where we see that Gently and Evan basically made a pact, and that pack was, well, you get your app, and I basically is going to do this waterfall. So that's kind of sort of where I'm at. We have what? This was episode 6. The meeting of the two minds, the passion, and Jelly kind of losing herself, and Evans not really paying any attention to the needs of, and he kind of sort of is, but then it kind of sort of isn't. So we have 7 and 8, 2 more episodes left, and so far, uh, uh, I think in the next 2 episodes going to be very interesting. That's my review and recap on episode 6, and I shall see you next week on episode 7. Until the next time, remember, love is basically for everyone, and I will be back. Kind of sort of looking for another show. I've been kind of moving into Netflix. I kind of see some things, but I haven't yet picked out some things that I really want to do some review and recap. Until the next time, this is all thing Cheryl. And remember, love is for everyone. Click the notification. Uh, do that thumbs up, do that thumbs down. Basically, leave comments. Let me know what you think about Evan and Gently. Do you think that Gently is going to snap a podcast? How do you feel about Evans giving up parts of the business? Do you think his partner is going to be happy with the decision that he's basically has made about the company? Ciao And I'll see you next week. And remember, love is for everyone.